as soon as the IMF announcement was made on Friday, the social media trolls began, and they had a video of me saying that I do not understand why an opposition or any politician will recommend that as soon as we have a problem, let's go to the IMF. Yes, but that's correct. You have a problem, you think through it, don't you? And then you find a solution. If you can't find a solution, then you go to the IMF. And did the Ministry of Finance find a solution or not? And I had some difficulties with this. So yesterday I went to speak to the people at the Ministry of Finance. Before then though, let's play the 35-second video of the point I made here on this show about why it is not great for an African country, as soon as you hit a problem, you go to the IMF. No, you have to think through it first. You have to take first steps to think through it and then create something. IMF can be a second, third, fourth, last option. That's the point I was making, and I think the point is still relevant. Here's the video. We don't find an economic problem and say that let us go to IMF. Why? Where is that coming from? Is that Kwame Nkrumah's Ghana? That the black man is capable of managing his own affairs? Have we forgotten that? Nkrumah said the black man is capable. He said, let us do the independence. And let us show the world that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. 50, 65 years later, the black man has a problem. He says, let's go to the IMF. Why? Why can't we have a problem, economic problem, and make a determination that this economic problem, we can do this? Yes, but I still stand by that. If you have an economic problem, you make a decision of what you want to do with the economic problem. If it gets to a place where you cannot do anything about it, then you go to the IMF. Did the government get to the place where they cannot do anything about it? I don't know. You answer the question. I have my answer, but I'm not going to tell you now. Let me tell you what my concern was, though, when I heard the announcement on Friday. And I begin with the Honorable Akufo-Addo, a very decent man at the Ministry of Finance, and people have been calling for let Akufo-Addo go, he's tired, he's rest, all that. Yeah, that's an opinion that people have. Others have a different opinion. But my concern was, first of all, the solution that was proffered by the government, a very difficult solution, was to introduce an innovative tax, E-levy. So I was worried that, did the Ministry of Finance get the projections of E-levy wrong? If they did, then that's bad. Then as a Ministry of Finance, they really shouldn't have projected wrong. Why am I saying that they may have projected wrong? You see it as I come through the story. So this is Honorable Akufo-Addo. This is Honorable Charles Edubua, the Deputy, the Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance, another gentleman, and a very dependable guy, I believe, that you can depend on. And this is the very hardworking Adom-Otchere, who is also a member of Parliament for Etiwa, Deputy Minister of Finance, and my own Member of Parliament, John Kuma. Dr. John Kuma, he's also the Deputy Minister of Finance. These are the four people upon whose shoulders, led by Akufo-Addo, that the entire process is standing, the entire process of recovery. And at the end of this presentation, I'll be talking about what we should be charging them with. That's after the IMF, what next? And we have to give them the faith and belief that they will be able to deal with it. But let's go on and look at the rest of the details that I put out. Okay, so E-levy projections. Now, here it is. Government had projected 600 million, which is what government was going to get from the E-levy over the period since E-levy came into pass up till now. And government was able to raise 60 million. Therein lied my concern. My concern was, how does a government set out to deliver a tax in this modern era, a tax that is electronic, calculated by mobile phone? So you know that transactions on mobile money was 100 billion, was 99 billion. And so if you are taxing 1%, 1.5% it was, wasn't it? 1.5% of it, this is what you're going to get. So you can make those projections very easily. So yesterday when I went to speak to people at Ministry of Finance, my concern to them was, how did you get your projections so wrong? What happened? I mean, should we have something to say about Ministry of Finance and Statistical Service in terms of the seriousness with which they approach E-levy, because the projections clearly turned out to be wrong. You cannot project 600 million and end up at 10%. But they explained to me why, and they seem to be to understand why what happened. Let me share some of it with you. And we are coming all the way to the IMF decision. Don't worry. It's a short presentation, but by the time we finish, you would have understood everything. You know that we always bring you the best. And just to reiterate that everything we'll say here is absolutely true. And you can take that for granted, because we have done a lot of work since Friday on this one. So you project 600 million and then you end up at 60 million. There has to be something. There has to be an answer to the question. Why are you projecting 600 and end up at 60? Okay, let's move on and see what happened. So we asked the question, what happened? How did the Ministry of Finance and the Statistical Service get the projection of revenue, potential revenue from E-levy so wrong that at this stage, the revenues could not support the argument, and then there had to be a compelling reason why you need an IMF policy supervision. But let's go on. So what happened? Now, there were exemptions. So in the debates in Parliament, and I'll come back to the Haruna Idrisu conversation much later. In the debate in Parliament, the tax was presented to the Parliament in November. Some people, especially some people even within the MPP, were concerned that there had not been enough education, then there had not been enough push on the PR side to tell people, there had not been sufficient communication across the country, within MPs, within constituencies, before you introduce such a major tax. And it happened to VAT. Remember, after the 1995 demonstration, Dr. Akufo-Addo and others went around the country to sort of get people involved. That had not happened. And some MPP communicators that I spoke to were explaining, because over the period, I spoke to MPP communicators, I spoke to NDC people who were quite happy with it, but I just wanted to get the sense of what the key political actors are thinking about this. And some MPP people felt that at the beginning of E-levy in November, there should have been more education. There should have been a lot more push, a lot more pressing of flesh into the society, to the people. All the things that Akufo-Addo did after November, going around the country with the information minister, they believe should have happened before the bill was actually put in the budget and laid before Parliament. So because of that, the Ministry of Finance, in its effort to get E-levy launched, succumbed to the minorities' conversations about exemptions. So many exemptions were introduced. At the beginning, the exemption was just for below 100 cedis. Now, several exemptions were introduced. The major exemption that was introduced, about which there had been significant circumvention, was the allowance of vendors to be able to send money without charging them E-levy, because the point was made that these vendors are not very rich people. A lot of them are young people who can't find jobs, and this is a makeshift job they are doing. If you're going to tax them, then you're really killing the process. So these exemptions were then put in the tax. Okay, so Ministry of Finance had its own exemptions tax and had its own calculation. The 600 million was actually occasioned by a delay from November to sometime in May, June. Otherwise, it would have been reading 1 billion. So their projection of 600 did not include some of those exemptions. And that's what they told me yesterday. Okay, now let's come to the circumvention. So what did the circumvention do? Customers, you and I, mobile money customers, all of us, were exploiting the exemptions of vendors. So if I wanted to send 1,000 cedis, and I know that 100 cedis is exempted, I give the 1,000 cedi cash to the vendor, and the vendor sends it to 10 different people. That's not captured by mobile money. So a vendor can send to 100 people a day. It's not captured by mobile money. If you multiply that by 5,000, 10,000 vendors, you see how much of the transaction that, because of the exemptions, has gone out of the mobile money bracket. So I asked them that, what are you going to do about this? And they sort of hinted that they will be looking at it, they'll be discussing with the telcos, and then it will come probably in the media review. If it's too soon, it will come in the November budget, where they are going back to Parliament to go and streamline some of these exemptions, and especially the circumventions. They're going to have to deal with it so that vendors will now be able to, for instance, send 3 transactions in a day or 3 transactions before midday without E-levy. The 4th one will attract E-levy, so that you sort of discourage people from going to vendors and say, vendor, here is the money, send it for me piece by piece by piece between now and afternoon, and then I don't pay mobile money. The other thing we found out was that the banking halls are getting choked. Why are the banking halls getting choked? Because a lot of these workers, those who work in restaurants, those who work on construction sites, they work for foreign companies. You have 600 workers in one goal, you have 700 workers here, 300 workers here. All of those people were paid by mobile money. And that was great because the technology was available. That is technology enabling people to work, okay? But with the E-levy, these people, these companies who were paying these people have now resorted to giving them checks. So they take their checkbook, which they had, nobody was dealing with checkbook for a long time, but suddenly checkbooks came back into fashion. So they take their checkbooks and then they write their check on it and then they give it to the guy. What it means is that the guy has to go to the bank, you know, which he wouldn't have needed to do before. And so the banking halls are getting choked. If you like, you can check tomorrow. And if you check at the end of June, anyone who went to the banking halls at the end of June when people were looking for salaries and salaries had come, you will see that the banking halls were choked. That was the story 5 years ago. Now it's come back because people are just dodging the E-levy. I don't know whether that's fair or that's unfair, but it's it's something that you need to look at yourself and then deal with it. So my concern, primary concern, was to the Ministry of Finance. It was not so much that you've gone to IMF, but this e-levy that you had put a lot of hope and interest and expectations on, how did your own e-levy fail so abysmally that you were not able to forecast that the e-levy was going to fail? That was my concern. And then they told me that these are the things that have happened, and that is a new tax, and when the tax is introduced, they look for the loopholes and they plug it. So it's going through the same cycle that every new tax goes through, and they believe that e-levy will bounce back. So that was the end of the e-levy conversation with them. That was my fundamental problem with the e-levy. Okay.